History might repeat itself, but it was all done in one take. This is History Unscripted, where each week we get together, a film buff and a history nerd, to give you the truth behind some of your favourite films. This is part 3 of our series on The Last Samurai. Let's go! Yeah, there's actually that is one of a cornucopia of insects in this room. Sometimes there are crows up there. Sounds like they're in the room.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Oh yeah, that's nice.
Yeah, because we're recording in the attic of our parents' house.
We are indeed.
Indeed,
we're home for Christmas.
Yeah, and we're in the room together for the first time recording the podcast.
Yeah, so this is our first. So sort of our biannual face-to-face.
Yeah.
Biannual can mean twice a year or once every 2 years. So here we are with our once every 2 years face-to-face.
They never really sorted out biannual. There was no sort of like fort yearly.
Fort yearly. Yeah. Well, there's bi-weekly, same thing.
Well, so they sorted bi-weekly out with fortnightly. That's every 2 weeks, but bi-weekly could be twice a week.
Yeah. It would be like, because nightly, it would sort of have to be like, Fort winterly, you know?
Yeah.
Winter's sort of the night of... Anyway,
excellent chit-chat.
Yeah. The kind of thrilling stuff we talk about here.
Exactly. So yes, hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of... Well, actually, we've got a new name. We're now called History Unscripted.
Yeah, it's fear of copyright. Is that it? Yeah.
Fear of being accused of stealing intellectual property.
Yeah.
We've decided to do the gentlemanly thing and, put our old name aside, as there was a YouTube channel with, admittedly, a very similar idea and name.
And in a very easily consumable, colourful, fun format. So,
yeah.
A lot to learn. But I think it's good. I think it's given us, change breeds creativity, right? Like, so this... What do I mean? I have a point.
It's a fresh start.
Yeah, it's a fresh start. And it means that we had time to really think about the podcast and sort of what the podcast means, what it's become, and try and figure out a name from that, and also sort of our ideas behind it. I found it very useful. It's a bit of a kick in the face to begin with, having to change the name. But it was fun to think about and sort of come up with new ideas. So
we slept on it, and History Unscripted... and that's our new name. That's what we'll be doing going forward. So welcome back. We are now, this is part 3 of our series on The Last Samurai. And we will be carrying on our story of the tale of the true Last Samurai, Saigo Takamori, today.
Yeah, well, I wasn't here last week, so, and obviously I listened to the podcast on the episodes. I'm not here, of course, but, just in case, maybe you want to tell us what we're going to be doing today and what happened last time?
Yeah, can do. Just before we do that, just want to remind everyone, the best way you can support the podcast is by engaging with it. If you're listening to this on Substack, you can give us a like, or you can restack it, or if you really like it, you can add us to your recommendations. That'd be brilliant. If you listen to this on YouTube, give it a like and subscribe. If you're on Spotify, you can follow us and leave us a review. Honestly, anything you can do to engage with us at the moment will really help us as we grow. So thank you very much.
And let us know about the new name as well. Obviously, we're not wedded to it yet. So if you think it's rubbish, if it gives the wrong impression, let us know. That'd be great.
Yeah, cool. So where were we? So Charlie wasn't here last time. So let me catch you up.
I was ill.
Yeah. Migraines, something like that. So last episode... Saigo, he'd returned from exile. Remember that? He was on the island?
Yeah.
Having a lovely time, making straw sandals.
Having children.
Yeah.
And then stealing them from his wife. All that
Not quite yet. He's just abandoned them.
He hasn't come back to steal them.
No,
okay.
The children have been firmly abandoned on Amama Ishimi. He will get them later in life. We'll get back to that. But yeah, so he was in exile.
Great idea for a revenge film.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Pitch that.
I'll pitch it.
Yeah.
Not now.
Not right now. So he was recalled to the mainland. He became a dominant figure in national politics. Culminating his high point, he was leading the Chosu campaign to punish the Chosu domain, who were being defiant against the shogunate. He did an absolutely bang-up job of it, managed to punish them without really punishing them, and that would open the doors for a future alliance between the Chosu campaign and the Satsuma domain against their real enemy, who are the shogunate.
Converted an enemy to an ally.
Exactly. Saigo's very good at that sort of thing. He's a nice chap. Then the shogunate was slowly losing its grip on power, and with the risks that Japan was facing, the pressure from the Western imperialists, Saigo knew that they needed strong leadership in the country, and as such, the shogunate would have to go. So he formed an alliance with the Chosu, as I just mentioned, and the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and they decided to band together with a few other daimyos to defeat the shogunate. Then, Emperor Meiji, as in Meiji Restoration, came to power.
That's where the name comes from.
Yeah, exactly.
Thought it was a coincidence.
Yeah, she wasn't called that at the time, but it was sort of a name given to him after his death. But Emperor Meiji comes to power, we'll call him that just for simplicity, and under pressure from Saigo and his allies, he dissolves the shogunate. Keiki, Saigo's former friend, now enemy, was the shogun at the time, and is eventually, he tries to politically outmaneuver Saigo, but is eventually backed into a corner, and is forced to fight.
And that's where we are now.
Yeah, so we left you last time with the opening salvos of what will become known as the Battle of Toba Fushimi between Saigo and the pro-imperialists and Keiki's army, which is the pro-shogunist army.
Yes, they're already the shogunates, the pro and are. And so this is going to take us, this episode, from this battle and sort of the forming of the Meiji Revolution.
Restoration.
And sort of the forming, cut that, and sort of the forming of the Meiji Restoration up to Saigo, this government he formed, sort of, he turns against it.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
And how does he get there? We will find out.
Exactly. Let's get into it. So, as I say, we left you at the beginning. Shots were being fired at the Battle of Toba Fushimi. So this is taking place in January 1868. As I say, on one side, we have the shogunal forces headed by Keiki, Saigo's old enemy, and on the other hand, we have an alliance of Satsuma and Chosu forces with some other guys as well. They're fighting because Saigo wants to get rid of the shogunate and the emperor to become the preeminent political power in the country, and obviously the shogunate are fighting to defend themselves in the old way of doing things. Saigo had managed to convince them into fighting by, first of all, politically outmaneuvering. The emperor has now dissolved the shogunate, and Saigo then sent some forces into Edo, which is the shogunate's capital, and attacked Edo Castle, damaging Keiki's honor and forcing him onto the battlefield. So that's where we are now. So, background on the battle then. So we have the Satsuma army on one side. They're outnumbered about 2-1.
Is it just Satsuma, or have we got some of Meiji's lot?
Yeah, so
as well.
And the Chosu. It's a bit of everyone. But for the simplicity's sake, we'll say Satsuma's Saigo's army. He's not the actual head of the army, but he's a very senior man within the army.
Okay.
But for simplicity's sake, Saigo's army on one side, they're outnumbered about 2-1. They're coming from Kyoto. The Tokugawa shogunate army is coming to attack the Wontogo.
Sorry, I just have a question before this. Saigo, at this point, does everyone consider everything that's sort of happening his idea? Or is it not really?
He'd say if there were 3 guys come out with all the ideas, he's always one of them.
Okay.
And he's sort of the most kind of honourable, most respected guy from everywhere.
But he's not like the leader.
No, because he's not actually... So the leader, they're all fighting for the emperor to come back in. So the emperor has princes and royal family members that are in sort of more specific positions of authority, but because Saigo is an excellent organizer and he's an excellent leader of men, he's usually like chief of staff.
Okay.
So he's the guy that makes shit happen.
Cool. Great.
Basically. And so, so Saigo is not quite leading the Satsuma army, but he's a very senior staff officer there. The Satsuma army is outnumbered 2-1. What it does is it cuts off the advance of the shogunal forces towards Kyoto, which is where the emperor is based. So the shogunal forces are attacking there. They have some very well-trained modern troops, so think samurai, but with bolt-action rifles.
Okay.
Maybe not bolt action, breech loading rifles. So they're still one shot, but they're rifles, you can fire them a long distance. They're not muskets.
Pretty accurate.
Sure. They have artillery, mortars, there are going to be landmines. Not at this particular point, but later on in the story there will be Gatling guns and machine guns. So the modern world is getting stuck into warfare in Japan.
Right. And a few katanas here and there as well.
Yeah, and also swords and spears, which is I think why it makes such an interesting kind of warfare period.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, at 5 p.m. on the 17th of Jan, 1868, the Satsuma artillery opened fire. Within the first kind of salvo, a shell explodes within the shogunal forces, killing one of the commanders. His horse goes berserk and runs backwards into the kind of marching column of the shogunal forces, sending everyone into a panic.
It's like hitting first time on battleships. Good.
Yeah, exactly.
Good for morale.
Essentially, like, sniped their commander with a shell from across the field.
Great.
Then this sends the shogunal forces into a panic. The Satsumas then attack with rifles and bayonets and swords and all that kind of fun stuff. And because the shogunal forces are panicking, they're driven back, but they do eventually hold the line, and a battle line is drawn, and it's sort of inconsequential on the first day. Night falls, but it could go either way.
Okay, great. So, first day over, Satsumas look ahead at this point in time, and then what happens?
Yeah, so there's fierce fighting in the second day. You have kind of really interesting moments where you have modern weaponry, rifle lines being charged with guys with swords and spears, and the power of these old weapons is still really effective. If you can get close to these kind of soldiers with rifles with a sword, you're going to cause them to panic and flee. So there's lots of that.
All shown very well on The Last Samurai film.
Yeah, exactly. So just out in the final battle scene in The Last Samurai as well. So it's kind of, again, could go either way on the second day. Saigo then gets involved. As his forces are outnumbered, he knows he has to be clever, so he makes this move. He goes to Emperor Meiji and says, right, we're fighting for you now, you're on our side. Can we show your banner on the battle line? And he goes, yeah, it's all a great idea. Brilliant.
Sure.
And so they raise the Emperor Meiji's banner, which essentially says, these are the goodies, Saigo's are the goodies, anyone who stands against this banner are the baddies. And the shogunal forces, although they want to keep the shogunate, they don't want to get rid of the imperial house. They still want the imperial house to sort of give them their authority, because they all love the emperor, but the shogunate loves being the shogunate as well. They want to be the first amongst equals, but Saigo and Hal, they want to get rid of the shogunate completely.
Sure, because the emperor's gods,
essentially
demigod,
descended from the gods. Yeah, and they love him. And so they put up the Emperor Meiji's banner, and this sends the shogunal forces into a panic. They've now essentially been told by their god emperor that they are the baddies. And so they start panicking.
Sure, that would work for me.
Yeah. This kind of sends panic through the ranks, and then the breaking point comes when one of the artillery regiments on the shogunal side essentially turns on their own army and starts shelling them from the rear, causing the shogunal forces to just break completely and flee.
Any idea why? Thinking they want to be on the goody side again?
Yeah, I think it's got a lot to do with that.
Wow. Big move, pulling up the banners.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, and it's Saigo's idea. So you can see, although he wasn't the complete commander, he's the guy thinking of these sorts of things.
Yeah, very clever.
So the shogunal forces then retreat to Yodo Castle, but the daimyo there, who is supposedly a shogunal supporter, refuses to open the gates. So then they have to retreat further to Osaka Castle, which is much further away. There, Keiki, the former shogun, says he's going to make his last stand, but then in the night, he sort of slips out of the castle. There is a American battleship in Osaka Bay, and for safety reasons, he spends the night on the ship. His troops are like, where the hell's Keiki gone? Where's our leader? So they completely panic, and then it's a complete rout all the way back to Edo.
Are the Americans involved, and the Europeans, they involved at this stage? Because he's obviously on an American warship.
Yeah, so on the shogunal side, the Americans are pretty neutral, but they're kind of just providing weapons to everyone.
Okay.
The French are very pro-shogun.
Okay.
So you have French officers commanding shogunal regiments. You have French-trained regiments in the shogunal army who are very good. And then on the Saigo side, you have the English providing weaponry.
Interesting.
So it's another sort of proxy war, because at this time, obviously, we love bashing the French, and the French love bashing us.
Okay, so it's sort of
proxy war, yeah.
America all over again.
Exactly. So the English want to help Saigo because they don't want the French to succeed.
Okay,
Classic.
great. Well, and we were on the protagonist side, so once again, point to the English.
Exactly. We win again, French.
Okay, great. And I'm sure there is a particular French artillery cavalryman who might come into the story later, but we'll see.
Yeah, exactly. But before we get to that, what was Saigo doing in all of this besides coming up with brilliant ideas? So as I say, he was a senior commander, and as such, he was not supposed to be at the front. He's a pretty old guy now for for the 19th century
How old
standards.
is
40.
Okay, yeah,
So-
middle-aged.
But he just loves battle. He's just kind of like a happy chappy in battle. And so he keeps sneaking to the front against his commander's wishes.
Barrels of laughter, sort of swinging his sword around.
You can imagine like some anime, this like enormous guy like, ha ha ha, just like shaking out, sweeping enemies away in front of him like he's
Yeah.
Sauron at the Battle of Mount Doom.
Yeah, nice.
You know? But he keeps going to the front. He's having a great time. He's fighting side by side with his friends and his relatives. He's telling his relatives like, if you don't come back wounded, I'm going to disinherit you. And then when they do, he's like, these guys, I love these guys.
Wow.
I'm going to cherish
gosh.
them forever.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's nice. He's having a good time.
Like a kind of drunk uncle.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of just like a drunk uncle, yeah. But obviously him being there, he's very inspiring, and they loved him for disobeying his orders to return to the front. So he's right in the thick of it, having a great time, basically.
Great.
Yeah. So, you mentioned French cavalry artillery officers.
I don't know, it just popped into my head.
Just caught in your head. It wasn't in the notes or anything. So I thought it might be a nice tangent, just to pull away from the main story, to talk a little bit about a real-life character who was the inspiration for Tom Cruise's character in The Last Samurai. So there was no Americans fighting, well, what would have been with Saigo later on in the Satsuma Rebellion, which is what The Last Samurai portrays. But there was a French officer who fought with the shogunal forces in what's going on now, which is called the Boshin Wars. So there's a chap called Jules Brunet. He's a French horse artillery officer.
Jules Brunet?
Yeah, Jules Brunet. He was a French horse artillery officer, and as I mentioned, the French were helping the shogunal forces. So he was sent in 1867, so the year before this battle, to help train the shogunal forces. When the battle, he's a pretty interesting guy. He's from small town France. He joined the army very young and had been all over the world fighting with the French. He fought in Mexico. He got lots of medals. He's a pretty stand-up guy, right? And I don't say that lightly about the French. He was. They do say he was pretty keen. When offered, when there was the call out went round for looking for officers to go to Japan, he said he was selected because he was quite insistent that he should go. So he's
Okay.
Yeah, he likes
to travel.
he likes to travel.
He likes to kill people.
Yeah,
Great.
little
Good
bit.
combo to be an army officer in Japan.
Exactly, because there's lots of killing people going on in Japan. So he arrived, he did a fairly good job of training the shogun's troops, but when the Boshin War broke out, the French government were like, all right, lads, let's get you out of here. And they called off the French mission to Japan, and most of them left, but there were two guys, one of them being Jules Brunet, who actually resigned from the French army to stay and fight.
Wow.
Yeah.
How noble.
Exactly. I looked it up. I asked ChatGPT many times, could you consider Jules Brunet a weeb? But actually, apparently he was more interested in, he liked the shogunal system and he just liked war rather than he was like super into Japanese stuff.
Okay, because Tom Cruise's character might be
Considered
the first weeb.
It's possible. And I tried my best to find something that would prove that this Jules Brunet guy was also a massive weeb, but actually there wasn't really anything that we could do.
Okay, that's a shame. It would be
disappointing.
nice for the record to have shown.
Yeah.
But alas.
But, so he was at this battle of Fushimi-Toba, so he would have fought against Saigo's forces. And I say he's an artillery commander, so he'd been working with a horse artillery, which is a very cool thing where you sort of gallop quickly with
Cannons,
a cannon.
I'm picturing cannons strapped to your horse.
Yeah, that's actually bang on.
Yeah?
You've nailed it.
Two on either side to keep the weight even.
Akimbo cannons on the horses.
Okay, cool.
You've got to be going really quickly. If the horse is standing still and they fire, the horse will go backwards.
Oh, it's
You've got to be galloping to match the speed of the shell. Otherwise,
that.
yeah, makes total sense.
I'm crunching the numbers. Yeah, it works. What were they actually?
Basically, it's just a load of horses pulling cavalry at high speed, so you can move the artillery around very quickly. That's the idea.
Okay.
Yeah. The only real difference then between Jules Brunet and this Nathan Algary guy played by Tom Cruise in The Last Samurai is, first of all, he was French, he wasn't American. He fought for the shogun, where Saigo, who inspires Katsumoto, would fight against the shogun. And it's earlier. It's earlier. So this is
slightly different war.
Different war. So the Boshin Wars, what we're talking about now, have actually happened before The Last Samurai started. I promise at some point we will get to...
Episode 3, still not there.
We will get to the problem is that actually the events of The Last Samurai don't take place for, like, it's quite a short period of time.
Yeah.
And this is all the build-up.
This is all very interesting stuff.
Yeah. But we'll come back to Jules Brunet later on in the story. He actually does have a really interesting role future on, but we'll come back to
Jules.
That. Yeah.
Au revoir, Jules.
Au revoir, Jules. So the battle for Toba-Fushimi was won by the pro-imperial forces. And then Saigo, to his massive discontent, was taken off the battlefield and put on essentially a jumped-up desk roll.
Okay.
And, told to command the march towards Edo, which is, the shogunal capital. So the imperial forces are now marching on the last standout of Keiki and his forces.
Okay.
So, despite his great protestations, he was essentially stuck at his desk job, but he absolutely hated it. He was even writing sort of slightly morbid letters to friends, being like, you got to get me out of this so I can die on the battlefield and meet you in hell. All that kind of stuff.
So Edo, this is where his career picks up. This is where he went from backwater samurai to the centre of politics. So it's quite a nice spot for a last stand, really.
It's a fantastic story arc. It's very helpful.
Yeah, and Kiki, who he was his first sort of big foray into politics, trying to get him onto as the shogunate.
Yeah.
It's all beautiful circular stuff.
It's incredibly useful for writing the story arcs for these episodes. So, but at this point, right? So he's at the desk job.
Yes.
And this is the first sign to Saigo that things might not be going the way he wants them to. Because, in feudal Japan, they weren't desk jobs. If you were a commander of an army, you commanded the army.
So desk jobs are sort of new.
Well, this is all about, and battles now, modern warfare is about logistics and supply. Whereas before it was like, turn up with your guys and your swords and you fight each other, right?
Yeah.
Now battles about, you win battles with firepower and logistics. Do you have more ammunition and more guns than the enemy? Right? And he's now in a desk
routes, etc.
Exactly. He's starting to be like, this isn't really what I want, and I'm not sure things are going the way I want them to. And this is an early sign that the modern world that he's actually fighting for, he's on the side of progress, might actually not be entirely what he bargained for.
Sure.
Yeah.
Careful what you wish for.
Exactly.
Saigo.
But despite his sulking, Saigo drove the army towards Edo with little incident. And in early March 1868, they pulled up outside Edo without basically anyone trying to stop them, set up camp at this place called Sunpu, and prepared to assault Edo.
So here we are. Saigo behind his desk on one side, Kiki cowering in Edo.
Yeah.
What happens?
So initially, this Kiki guy has been like a thorn in Saigo's side for decades almost at this point.
Kiki.
Kiki?
Kiki.
I don't know.
Anyway.
Kiki. So Saigo marches up to Edo, essentially demands a surrender. Very harsh terms. His terms, of course, include Kiki's head. Sure,
he's been a real thorn in his side for a while. It's fair enough.
Yeah. I wonder who just said that.
Did you?
Literally
sorry. Okay. Do you want to do that again?
No. It'd be funny. But yeah, Keiki, again, being the sneaky survivor he is, he's sort of like a cockroach. You can't kill him, no matter what.
Stomp him out.
No. By the time Saigo had turned up, he'd preemptively resigned and sort of withdrawn from Edo into like private life. He's like, I'm not really part of politics anymore.
So wet.
I know.
It's so pathetic.
Yeah. So, and then in his place, he'd put a man called Katsu Kaishu. So Saigo met with Katsu. And this Katsu guy, he's a shrewd choice. He was a supporter of the shogunate, but not in everything they did. You might remember the Chosu campaigns from the previous episode where Saigo was kind of looking great because he'd led these campaigns. Katsu Kaishu had actually been against the attacking of Chosu by the shogunate. So he was kind of the sort of guy that, although he was on the shogunate side, Saigo would be like, I can agree with him on some things. So it was a good choice. He went to Saigo and basically told him, like, look, you've beaten us, right? There's nothing we can do now. You won that big battle. We're obviously going to surrender, but let's not be too harsh about it. Right.
Okay.
So he put a few arguments to Saigo. First of all, he harkened back to one of Saigo's old big victories, the Chosu campaign, and he said, like you were with the Chosu, you showed mercy, and that obviously was a good thing for the country. Do that now. Obviously that hit him very well. He said that the Tokugawa and the Imperials both loved the Emperor, and that was something that they could all agree on, and they both did, right? And that is actually one of the reasons why Keiki had fled, is because Keiki was also very upset when he saw the Imperial banner waved against him. He's like, what have I done? Basically, the Emperor, who is my whole world, is turned against me.
So sort of like the Zack Snyder film Batman vs Superman, where two people at each other's throats realize that they have a common bond when they find out that I think both their mothers are called Martha. I can't remember. I think I haven't seen the film, but I remember that being a meme for a while. I think if that is the plot, let us know. So it's very similar.
Very similar. About as weak as Gladiator 2, Paul Mescal all of a sudden loving Pedro Pascal because he's like, I knew your father. And he's like, I also had met my father.
Yeah.
And then now he's like, I saw the man. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. It's not quite that weak, but actually this is a bit more deep.
No, it does. Yeah.
So this kind of shared loyalty, he's like, I see it. Then he also tried to convince Saigo. Saigo's a very honorable guy. He was trying to convince him it's not very honorable to kick a man whilst he's down. You should show magnanimity in victory. Again, Saigo loved that. And then finally, he played on Saigo's deeply Confucian belief that a government should essentially rule by example. And if he was going to demonstrate the sort of act of benevolent honor by sparing Keiki's life, then that would spread out through this new Japan that he was helping to create, and it would be a really positive start to the new world he was bringing in. Very Confucian belief.
Okay, so it's sort of generally like, hey, Saigo, you're a nice guy, you're a cool, honourable guy, chill, and that sort of worked.
Yeah, exactly, and it kind of worked. So Saigo is convinced.
Yeah.
And he goes back to the Emperor, and he goes, you know what? Let's let him go. And Edo Castle falls without bloodshed. And I think on that note, we should take a break.
Yes. Great. Good idea.
Yeah. So you can join us in the second half where we'll be discussing, a bit further the peaceful surrender of Edo Castle. What happened to Jules Brunet after the Battle of Tuba-Fushimi.
Don't want to miss that.
And then the rise of the Meiji government and Saigo's role within it. So we'll see you then.
Goodbye.
Segway.
You're not supposed to say segue.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice.
Anyway, and welcome back.
Oh, we're going. Sorry.
We are going, indeed. So where we left off, Edo Castle had just surrendered to Saigo and his forces. Keiki had been allowed to survive. Just give you a few more details on that so you can get the full picture. So Keiki was permitted to retire. He would die peacefully in 1913.
Wow.
Having outlived all of his enemies, including Saigo.
Well, that's nice.
Yeah, good for him.
Good for him.
Yeah.
The worm survived.
Exactly, the cockroach always survives.
But what we've all been really excited about, what happened to Jules?
Jules Brunet. We'll get there.
Oh,
a little bit more about Edo Castle first.
Sorry.
So Edo Castle was handed over to the Imperials. All the shogunal forces were spared, but they had their weapons and equipment confiscated off them. But they were like, well, we'll return them once the war is over, basically. You're not going to be demilitarized. So it was a defeat with honor for the shogunate. Classic Saigo defeat, basically. He always allows them their honor. This basically concluded the first part of what was known as the Boshin Wars. But the war was far from over, as many of the shogun's best forces, sort of within a day or two, actually kind of melted away and started a guerrilla war, and this would go on for a few more months, fighting in the countryside, being general nuisances, going up north, forming their own republics. We'll get into that in just a minute. Within Edo itself, it's an imperial city, so every one of these daimyos has like their own walled-off residence. So it's incredibly easy to defend and incredibly difficult to kind of like pry people out. They're like ticks. They're stuck in. Yeah. They do not want to get out. And there was lots of groups of shogunal force soldiers who didn't agree with the surrender. And so Saigo had to spend a few months kind of putting down these simmering rebellions within Edo itself. Again, would make a really cool TV series, I think. Just the battles against like specific factions in different parts of the city. There's this one battle known as the Battle of the Black Gate, which is a badass name.
That is a badass name.
Which was fought by Saigo against some shogunal loyalists who set up a base in this place called the Kanneiji Temple in Edo. It was a bloodbath. As I say, it's very hard to get these guys out. They got walls around. The Satsuma forces, led by Saigo, essentially rushed the gate, and there's hand-by-hand sword katana combat going on. There's bows and arrows, there's rifles, there's landmines, which is wild. All this kind of modern and feudal weapons all going together. The Chosu guys, they go around the back, they jump over the back wall, and then it's over. And then this basically is the last spark of resistance within Edo, and Saigo has like personally snuffed it out.
So Edo, is it full of these little walled estates then? Is that why there's so many groups of resistance?
Yeah, so in Edo, you have the Imperial Palace, or the Shogunal Palace.
Yeah.
And then around it, you would have had the homes of all of the retainers, the daimyo, the kind of elite retainers, and those would have been walled off enclosures with their own guards and forces.
So it's like a bunch of mini castles within it. Wow, that would make for a cool TV series.
I mean, if you've seen Shogun, the new TV,
I haven't.
Really good. You get a very good idea of it then. There's lots of kind of inter-political battles within the families within Edo where, you know, they kind of have to like invade each other's mini castles within the castle. It's really good.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, definitely worth a watch. But that was it. That was the Battle of the Black Gate. It's the last resistance in Edo. And then within 2 months of the Battle of Black Gate, Edo would have its name changed to Eastern Capital, or Tokyo, as it's known today.
Ah.
Yeah. So Edo is Tokyo. You asked about Jules Brunet.
Plot twist I did not see coming. Edo was Tokyo the whole time. Wow.
What happened to Jules Brunet? So when Edo fell, Brunet was still fighting with the shogunal forces, but he managed to escape. He fled north to a place called Hokodate, which is a port town which they quickly captured, and then they declared themselves the independent Republic of Etso.
Republic? Interesting.
Yeah. Which is interestingly Western. A republic.
Yeah, very French of him.
Ah, yeah, good point. Yeah. We as a Republic of Etso.
Yeah.
The Japanese guys are like, what the hell's a republic?
Got the guillotine out.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Just like an enormous katana coming down.
Yeah, nice.
And Brunet then became their Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Well, you know, he's got the experience. He's foreign.
Yeah, it's true. He basically, this new republic, they were trying to get like international recognition, you know, so that they'd be like meeting with foreign officials and he would be like meeting them in his French uniform and be like, we are the Republic of Etso. You must recognize us. But nobody really did because they were just a port town.
Yeah. So he went so native, he formed his own country inside Japan.
Yeah, he went so native, he went all the way through native, stopped being a native, became a native of a different country within the country.
Wow.
Yeah.
Jules.
And then on top of that, he basically reorganized the remaining shogunal forces into like a few crack regiments. Weren't very many of them, though. There was probably a couple thousand guys left at this point, so...
Yeah.
How long this was going to last.
Yeah.
It all came to a head at the Battle of Hakodate in 1869, which is essentially the shogunal forces' last stand. It was the last battle, essentially, of the Boshin War, where Saigo's forces, the imperial forces, turned up, and obviously they massively outnumbered these sort of 2,000 remaining shogunal rebels. And they're now the rebels, interestingly, which is flip it and reverse it. And they were defeated. But Jules Brunet survived, but he escaped Japan because he was a wanted man by the Imperials. And he returned to France and basically went on to have, a continuously interesting career. He fought in the Franco-Prussian War, did a very good job, even though they lost. got lots of medals and so on, and died.
You just can't do this kind of stuff anymore, you know? Go to a foreign country, set up your own country within it, become a wanted man, flee, and, get stuck into the next one and be celebrated as a hero. It just doesn't happen.
Exactly.
Nowadays.
People they don't appreciate, imperialists turning up with muskets and telling them, I can run your army.
Yeah, no, it doesn't fly anymore, does it? And we're the worse off for it, I think.
So the war was now won, and, all the change that Saigo and his allies, I did it again.
Yeah,
allies had been fighting for would now need to come to pass. Right, the war is over. We've got to make the change that we set out to. But Saigo, by this point, he didn't really want to be part of that future anymore. Not only was he increasingly disappointed with modernity, but he believed he'd survived his suicide attempt many years earlier for one particular reason, and he felt that his mission was to get rid of the shogunate, and he'd done it. So why should he need to do anything else? Can he not rest?
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Go sow his rice seeds. What's that?
That's pretty bloody racist.
Yeah. We want to cut that.
Yeah. No, making his straw sandals and hunting and fishing and things like that. So he decided he wasn't going to be a part of the central government and he would return to Kagoshima. However, as I say, everybody wants a piece of the Saigo. The new government, the newly formed government, which is now the Meiji government, the Meiji Restoration had occurred. Emperor Meiji was now the only political force within the country, and he had a modern government to put in place to run it on his behalf.
He had been restored.
Indeed, he had. But
everyone wants a bit of Saigo.
Everyone wants a bit of Saigo.
He's the big man.
He is the big man. An enormous man for that time. 6 foot, 240 pounds, or something like that. So the newly formed government wrote to him again and again, demanded his return, and eventually got his daimyo to kind of be like, Saigo man, you gotta go. We actually don't really want you here. Can you please bugger off? So he goes and he becomes one of the 3 major governors, politicians, chancellors, something like that, within the newly formed Meiji government. His first issue would be to deal with the demands of domain reform. All of these warriors that had been fighting the shogunate, young guys from the lower ends of samurai society, sort of the bottom couple of ranks, had now returned to their domains and were kind of sick of it. They were like, we've done all the fighting, we've changed the world, and now you want to keep us in these bottom 2 ranks? We want to be part of the government. We want to have proper jobs. We want to have good opportunities. And that was the first kind of major sign that big political changes were coming. They had pretty radical reforms, but Emperor Meiji had made an oath upon his restoration that he would bring Japan into the future and form it into a proper, essentially westernized nation state.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he's sticking to it.
Exactly. And now the daimyo, who'd basically spent the last decade or so fighting for the emperor, were going to quite quickly realize that they were now in the way of this future that Emperor Meiji wanted to bring to his country. And Saigo would also start to feel a little bit of the pressure there as well.
So tell us about the Meiji Restoration. What did that mean for Japan?
So, first thing first, they essentially went for a pretty similar governing system that we had today. Representative government, you vote people in, they have to get budgets approved, there are laws they have to pass. It's no longer just the daimyo says whatever they want and whatever passes. So one of the first things they did was abolish the Han system. The Han system was essentially the feudal system in Japan, where a daimyo ran a domain and you owed your loyalty to that daimyo, and he essentially had complete power over the people in his domain. That was the first to go. And Saigo was involved in that, felt very guilty, but he knew if they didn't get rid of the daimyo, they would keep having these kind of continuous civil wars, like the Boshin War, because these super powerful guys felt that they were entitled to ruling parts of the country, and you knew in a modern nation state, you can't have many warlords everywhere.
So he's he's having to sort of kill all the things he loves and holds dear to sort of have peace, I suppose.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. He must kill his darlings. Indeed. He felt very, very guilty about it, especially because, his own daimyo had just sent him back to Tokyo to become part of the government. And now one of the first things he did was abolish the daimyo. And they were replaced with governors. And most of them were replaced with governors from other parts of the country to stop this kind of domain rule. But the Satsumas, because they're kind of special and they just don't listen, they had a local guy become the governor. But it wasn't the daimyo. The daimyos were essentially pensioned off. They were given really good government salaries, but told that, obviously you're still an important guy, but you're not actually in charge anymore. Okay. So that was a big first step. Secondly, there was the formation of a central army. So they'd had to create a central army to fight the shogunate anyway, so it kind of formed from that. But obviously that was made up of parts of the domains. There was the Satsuma part, there's the Chosu part. They got rid of that and they started forming regiments that were not kind of located in specific areas. So it's kind of blending the cultures of Japan into a centralized army. Saigo, he's kind of a fan, but he sees that the new Meiji government is sidelining samurai in favor of kind of commoners. And he's starting to be like, are you trying to upset the samurai? He's not very happy with it.
Sure.
Yeah. On top of that, they decided they were going to learn as much as they could from the rest of the world. So the Tokugawa shogunate had essentially closed Japan off from the rest of the world. Recently, there'd been a bit more opening up, but now they wanted to learn how the rest of the world does things. So they send off this mission abroad to go travel. They're going to go to London, New York, Paris, Moscow, everywhere, and see how they do things, try and kind of cherry pick ideas to bring back to Japan. At the same time, the actual, normal political normalization of the Meiji government was happening, and before it had been always based on kind of deference and honor, but now this is politics. So guys who used to be honorable samurai, who would always bow to each other and were now kind of mudslinging in the political arena. Public opinion was starting to matter in politics, and because of it, the kind of nastiness of modern politics was starting to come into what had once been an extremely kind of constrained and honor-based society. A society that Saigo was obviously a massive fan of. And now he's starting to see that, people would start doing, political stunts.
You have to put on a show.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
And he wasn't a big fan of it. And he also saw that this international mission was more of that. They were kind of pandering to the people, but they're also focusing more on the outside world than they were on Japan. And this combination of just trying to take ideas from the West and apply them to Japan without really thinking about it was starting to kind of rub Saigo the wrong way. There's a few other things that were important. They did an international education system. Yeah, he was skeptical because essentially he thought they were again just taking a Western idea, which is a kind of national standard education, and applying it to Japan.
I mean, gone are the days of cutting people with swords, cutting bodies with swords and biting off ears.
Yeah, those days are over. It's a shame. Again, it just seems more that to Saigo that they're prioritizing modernization over Japanese culture. It kind of feels like they're just throwing Japanese culture aside for this kind of shiny new thing. He doesn't like it. And then there's universal conscription. He hated that. He was okay with the modern army, but then now anyone can be in the army, and that kind of goes against the samurai as being special and apart. So this all comes to a head, what's known as the Seikanron debate, which would be Saigo's breaking point. And this was essentially, Saigo at this point, from you can hear from what I'm saying, he's not very happy at this point, right? It's not going the way he wants it to. He's spending a lot of time in Edo arguing, and he's kind of getting old now. He's in his mid-40s. At this point this is the 19th century, 45's old.
Yeah.
He's probably not going to make it to 60, so he kind of wants to chill out. It's starting to take a toll on him. He's starting to gain a lot of weight. He gets angina, which is essentially where you get fatty deposits in the arteries around your heart, and you get heart pain.
Oh, that's not good.
No, exactly, because he's stressed and he's eating and he's just not enjoying life.
So, do you think these political things from the Meiji Restoration, do you think this is an overcompensation for the shogunate? Do you think they are they've sort of demonized the shogunate and their way of doing things, cutting off foreign policy, trying to stay traditional, and they've almost like slingshotted too far the other way.
I think so. I think it's like an overreaction, an overcorrection. Sure. They've now gone from a kind of special, unique, independent culture to like, let's just do what everyone else is doing and essentially fuck our own people.
Because the shogunate represented traditional Japan.
I think so. And I think Saigo is now starting to see that, like, maybe he got more than he'd bargained for by getting rid of the shogunate so quickly.
Yeah, he dug his grave.
Exactly. So at this point, Japan and Korea were having a political fallout. They had refused to accept the Meiji government, refused to recognize it. And they were also kind of like razzing Japan. They were like, you absolute wet wipes. Look how quickly you're just getting rid of like all the things you thought were important because, the Westerners told you it was nice.
Oh, that must sting.
Yeah. They're essentially they're picking on them. The Japanese guys turn up in Korea like wearing suits and top hats, and the Koreans are like laughing at them in the street, being like, you Western dogs, you know. And Saigo, I mean, he's pretty upset about that. It's a slight to Japanese national honor. But I think at this point it's more like Saigo, he was just looking, I think he was sick of it. He was tired. I think he wanted to throw himself back into kind of something active. And so he says, we should go show the Koreans what for. I'll lead the way. I'll go to Korea and I'll make them apologize. Fully accepting that he'd probably die in Korea. But at this point...
He's always looking for an excuse, isn't he?
Yeah, I think...
His whole life, he just wants to die in battle, and he never seems to.
Yeah, well, he will. He will eventually. He proposes a military expedition to Korea and argues that it would punish Korea for their disrespect and provide employment for all the discontented samurai that now were, flooding Japan because, again, they don't have anything to do anymore. The samurai has essentially been gotten rid of. And he demanded that he would lead it himself. And yeah, I think he's just tired. He's disillusioned with modernity and he wants to, as I say, die with honor rather than live with shame.
Just a good old-fashioned battle to get stuck into. Simple, clean-cut goodies and baddies.
Yeah.
Kind of stuff Saigo likes.
Exactly. There's none of this kind of, the dirt of like modern politics, the mudslinging, But, to his horror, instead of like a full-on honorable invasion, they send one Japanese battleship into Korean water to kind of like goad the Koreans into firing on them, who do, and then they kind of unload on this Korean fort and shell it to pieces. Basically tricking the Koreans into attacking them, and then coming back after shelling them to pieces and going, we did it!
Not very Bushido of them.
Not very Bushido at all.
No.
No. Saigo's upset. He's outraged. He thinks that they've tricked the Koreans and that their attack was kind of pathetic. But one of the other guys in the government, this guy Okobu, who's also from Satsuma, essentially tells Saigo that a war with Korea is not worth destroying the budget. So now you kind of see these really modern terms, like essentially they'll put them into a deficit to invade Korea, and we can't be doing that because we're a modern nation state. We need to balance the books.
Boring.
Exactly. It's really boring. So Saigo essentially gets politically outmaneuvered, embarrassed, and he's just so upset with this rejection of his plan that he decides that's it, and he submits his resignation. And he leaves for Kagoshima, never to return to Tokyo.
Wow. And this sounds a lot like a scene from The Last Samurai. Have we pretty much caught up now, could you say?
Yeah, so we are probably now at the beginning of the story of The Last Samurai. I say The Last Samurai is obviously not a true story, but at this point, when Tom Cruise's character Nathan arrives in Tokyo, Katsumoto is away in the woods because he has left Edo because he is no longer welcome in this modern state.
And the Irakuru missions, that went out travelling to New York, for example, about the same time, they'd come back just as Saigo's leaving or thereabouts, so they could have brought a young Scientologist with them, mayhaps. Who
A
knows?
young, extremely wealthy Scientologist could have come with them, indeed, and brought Scientology to Japan, and then wouldn't we all be the better for it?
Well, but that's something to think about. And what a good place to end, I reckon.
Yeah, exactly. We've now given you all of the backstory and background. So that's the first 3 episodes. Get ready for the next 18 episodes. No, just kidding. There'll be one more episode as we will actually cover the events of The Last Samurai, or what they are inspired by, which is Saigo's rebellion, which would become known as either the War in the Southwest or the Satsuma Rebellion, which would culminate in his eventual and extremely badass death at the Battle of Shirayama.
Cool. I'm excited for that.
Yeah. So that's going to be fun. So that's what we'll do next episode. This was a laugh, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Doing it together.
This was great. It was nice to be in person. And this was a really, really interesting chapter of Saigo's life. I mean, they just seem to get more and more interesting.
Yeah.
So we'll see you next time.
Indeed. Next episode, join us again as we carry on to the finale of Saigo Takamori's life. What happened when he got back to Kagoshima? How did his rebellion start? How did it go? Spoilers, not very well. And, what was the aftermath of his honourable death at Shirayama? So if you would like to join us then, we will see you next week. Thank you very much.
It's been History Unscripted.
Exactly.
Our title.
Our new name. History Unscripted. We'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.